This is the Earth Science Clash, and welcome back to the channel. This video is on experimental variables and the types and different variations you can get in experiments and why it's important to understand these variables within the scientific method. So it's in the Unit 1 playlist, which is the introductory playlist of how to become an Earth scientist. And let's check out these variables. So a variable in experiments is described or defined as two things. First, the experiment is a test that you do generally in science or any kind of subject where you are trying to undertake a certain procedure that is scientific and you want to test something, test a hypothesis, or do some sort of set-by-set procedure to acquire information or acquire data. Then a variable is something that can change or something that is part of the experiment that can be modified, changed, fluctuated, or adjusted to whatever you want in terms of what you want to get out of the experiment, the purpose, and the function of that experiment to align to what your question is or your hypothesis is. So there are three types. There's independent, dependent, and control. The independent variable within an experiment is the variable that you can change. So there's many different factors or parts to an experiment that you can change and you can adjust. And this is the independent variable. So remember it as I equals I change. I can change something. Now, the independent variable can be a couple of things you could change. I could change one thing or change a whole ton of different factors within an experiment. It can also fluctuate, but it can also affect what you're trying to get out, which is the dependent variable. But the independent variable does not depend on each other. So you could change various things within an experiment, but they don't affect each other. That is the independent variable. So the dependent variable, in contrast to the independent variable, that is obviously different. It is what you are trying to achieve or take out from your experiment. So it's the data, it's what you're measuring, what you are looking for in terms of either qualitative or quantitative data out of the experiment. So it's what the whole point of the experiment is, to gather or acquire information or data on the experiment based on the hypothesis and the question. And that's what you're going to use for your analysis and conclusion. So in relation to the scientific method, how it fits in, this is the experimental stage, and you are using your dependent variable as your data from which to forge analysis or analyses and conclusions based on the information. So it's different from the independent. So generally there's only one or maybe two dependent variables in the experiment. So a control or controlled variable, that is something that stays the same, is consistent, a factor or component of the experiment that you intentionally keep the same as to use it as a form of comparison. So one test would have no control and just various independent variables we can change. But the dependent variable between both tests, you can compare with the control variable, compare which one is different and how much. So you can bring in the stats and the math to your analysis and conclusion when you have a control variable, whereby you can see a difference in the dependent variable, the data that comes out of the experiment, when you have two different ones, one with control and one without. So it's used for comparison as scientists as an easy form of relating information against each other and comparing. So for an experiment, real life experiment, we have a player shooting the ball and trying to score from a penalty kick in soccer or football with a goalkeeper in goal. Now, the dependent variable would be how many goals did this striker or player score, and he or she had 10 attempts. Now that would be what you're measuring, what you're taking out, is the number of goals scored. The independent variable is something you could change. So that could be whether you take the penalty on grass, on turf, on a sandy field, or on a concrete surface. Maybe you have the goalkeeper wear gloves or wear no gloves, or the striker or shooter wear cleats or boots and shoot the left foot or shoot right foot, or they got to spin around 5 times then shoot, or to have no cleats or boots on at all and shoot barefoot. So those are all things you can change. Maybe shoot at nighttime, shoot in daytime, shoot with the sun in their eye or sun behind their back. So you can change all these variables. And then the control aspect, the control variable, would be that the penalty spot is taken from the same distance, 12 yards, as per normal, or the goal remains the same size, which is 8 by 24. So certain things would stay consistent, or the amount of times they shoot, which is 10. So again, some things are consistent, which are control, some things you can change, which is independent, and one thing you would measure, which is the amount of goals the person or the shooter is going to score in goal. So for more of a laboratory experiment, you might look at a test looking at plant growth with multiple plants of certain species. And you might look at the dependent variable, which is the data you collect, which is maybe the amount of growth the plant has over a certain period of time in these conditions, and the biomass added. And the independent variable is things you could change. Things like the species of plant, whether it's close or far away from the sunlight, whether it's real sunlight or regular sunlight or artificial sunlight, the type of soil, the fertilizers, the nutrient level, the water level. That's all can be changed within the experiment. That's the independent. And the control may be the time which you feed the plants, or time which you measure the plants, or it could be the containers the plants are in, or it could be the same soil for all the same plants. So you could adapt and change an independent variable and create your own control variable as to bring about different measurable information and data, which is the dependent variable.